Hey everyone, this is Mark Ryan coming at you with another video. Now, one thing that I've been looking forward to are the TGC Good Faith debates. A.D. Robles has been talking about them and John Harris has been talking about them. Well, they had their first debate and it was about gun control and it really grabbed my interest. And I thought, hey, surely A.D. Robles would be talking about this by now or someone, but I haven't seen anyone within our community talking about this yet. Now, I'm probably going to start calling the Gospel Coalition's Good Faith Debates the new Elephant in the Room conference. Why? Because at the Elephant in the Room conference, you had a pastor who would start out church with Highway to Hell. And they would sit down and debate, have a chat about it. And he would say, I did nothing wrong. New people are coming to church. They're saying the prayer. They're getting baptized. Numbers are way up. And what's the matter with you? People at other churches, they're not saying the prayer. They're not opening their church with Highway to Hell, and so people aren't getting baptized. They're not drawing a crowd. So what's wrong with them? I just love people. I want them to get saved, and so I did nothing wrong. And at the end of the conference, there was no agreement that you should not start your church service out with Highway to Hell. There was never any clarity there. They just ended. They said, hey, you're a brother. We're all brothers, and so we just want unity and no clarity there. And so, folks like even Andy Stanley will open out church with Led Zeppelin now. But during the Elephant in the Room conference, they would sit down even with a heretic, T.D. Jakes, and have a conversation and then they affirm him and embrace him as a brother. Gospel Coalition, I think, will do the same thing. Why? They'll sit down with someone who embraces critical race theory, the woke stuff, all that nonsense, and say, hey, they're a brother. There'll be no clarity on whether this is something that Christians can agree with. There'll be no refuting the error and saying, hey, you may not start out church with Highway to Hell. You may not say that all white people are racist. That's unjust, unbiblical, and it's wicked. Let me sum up the debate for you. There are two guys and kind of a moderator. One guy was saying, hey, the right to bear arms and the right to self-defense, that is not only a patriotic American and a Montanan position, that is a biblical position as well. The second guy is a pacifist. So he was saying, he made 4 points. I forgot him really, except for the last one. The last one was just, whoa. He was saying that Christians, we do not believe in self-defense, essentially. We should not use violence for self-defense, the only non-violent self-defense. And beyond that, and we'll watch the video clip if you think that I'm joking, beyond that, even nations should not engage in self-defense. So if you have a nation invade another nation, that nation should not defend itself like using force. If you can use non-force, non-violence to defend yourself against a nation invading you, doesn't make sense to me. But that would be an un-Christ thing to do to defend yourself. So we're going to take a look at mostly, hey, it's the British guy who's arguing for pacifism and for like gun control and stuff. And so I'm going to title the video, TGC is coming after your guns, and won't be that popular in Montana, that's for sure, their position. But ironically, it's the British guy saying, hey, nope, self-defense, even if a nation invades you. Let's watch that clip real quick. And hey, I'm not taking him out of context. He actually believes this.
Civilian own a weapon that a civilian, that would have been the kind of a weapon that a militiaman would have owned.
Okay, and so this guy, I forget his name. I think it's Brett Thune or Bob Thune or something. But he's your conservative. He's the guy that's arguing self-defense, bearing arms, that's a good thing and a biblical thing. And the other guy is going to pop in here pretty soon.
So they've allowed for the growth of technology, but not for the kinds of weapons that we would have always said, a tank or a cannon or whatever, those kinds of things that are more of a clear, they're meant for a certain purpose and meant to be used by the nation in the defense of a nation.
Well, he opened up a question to you as it pertains to national defense. How would you answer that question?
So
and let me pop in right now in that, hey, there's a conflict going on right now, right? We all know what I'm talking about. There is a war going on between two nations. One was an aggressor against the other nation, and What would this guy, assert would be Christian-like behavior, Christ-like behavior here with that war that's going on with an aggressor against another nation?
Pacifist, or I mean, that might not be the best term, committed to nonviolence. So yeah, I would apply it through national defense as well. But
So TGC's guy they brought to the debate said, yes, I would apply this nonviolent self-defense. He's a pacifist. He applies that to national defense as well. Blows my mind. So understand, it is his argument that it is unchristlike behavior for a nation to defend itself using force. And so let the aggressor ransack, pillage, rape, plunder, murder, all those things. That is the righteous thing to do. Now I'm going to rewind earlier to the debate where he's making his arguments against self-defense, and we'll just take a look at what he has to say here. Now he's going to go on to say that Christians should never use self-defense, like forceful self-defense. Why? Because Jesus Christ never used self-defense himself. That will be his argument. We'll listen to it here in a second. But before that, I had a thought pop in my head on, a nation engaging, or a people group, let's call it that, engaging in self-defense. Who was it? Haman hatched a plot to have God's people just slaughtered and killed and massacred. We read about it in the book of Esther and what happened with God using Queen Esther at such time as this to save his people. And what happens at the end of the story? Well, Haman, ironically, he's hanged on his own gallows, which he would argue that would be wrong when you listen to the debate. Unless, hey, that was Old Testament, now we're in the New Testament. And so there's almost this unhitching from the Old Testament that goes on with this person, with TGC in this debate. How so? Well, the right to self-defense and the Mosaic Law and these kind of things, we can see clearly that there is a right to self-defense. And beyond that, there is the death penalty in the Old Testament. If someone sets out to murder someone, or even commits adultery, that would warrant the death penalty. Well, he's arguing that even the death penalty is unchristlike, is wrong as well. And so you're gonna find that if you follow his reasoning, you're unhitching yourself to some degree, to some extent, from the Old Testament. But under the story of Queen Esther and God using her to save his people, what happens? Well, the king grants God's people the ability to do what? To defend themselves. And if he were consistent, he would have to say that them defending themselves against lethal force to kill them, to murder them, well, that is unchristlike. That is unchristlike behavior because, well, certain things are immutable. If someone has what's unchristlike behavior today would be unchristlike behavior 2,000, 3,000 years ago, right? Am I wrong there? Hey, maybe my argument doesn't hold weight. Let me know if you disagree in the comments. But if he were consistent with his reasoning, then God's people would be, they'd just be extinct. They'd be wiped out unless God saved them another way, but they would not be allowed to defend themselves against the aggressors who are out to murder and kill them all. With that, hey, let's look at this now.
Well, my fourth claim is more radical.
And we just skipped the first three because the first three, they were, okay, they're your standard stuff. They're kind of your Democrat talking points with gun control and all that. But let's listen to this one.
Claim is that Christians should oppose the use of deadly weapons on principle because we're committed to the way of Jesus, the way of the cross, the practice of nonviolence. Followers of Jesus should oppose the use of AR-15s or machine guns in self-defense for the same reason that we should oppose landmines, drone strikes, capital punishment, abortion, you name it. Christians should never kill people.
But again, to hold this position, you almost have to unhitch from the Old Testament. Why? Because we can read in the Old Testament where there's time after time after time where people are put to death and God's smile is upon it. We could talk about the angel of the Lord who kills an army of, I believe it's 185,000 people. And God's smile is upon that. He is protecting his people during that time. I think that's with the story of King Hezekiah. Understand the 185,000 people, like they are dead. God's smile is upon it. He's protected his people. And not only is God the Father's smile upon it, Jesus Christ, who's at perfect harmony with God the Father, his smile is upon it as well. But we could go even further. Hey, God sees great wickedness just covering the earth, but Noah finds grace in the eyes of the Lord, and God spares Noah and his family. But understand, God kills everyone else in the worldwide flood. And so Jesus Christ never killed anyone. Well, what do you call the worldwide flood then, right? Jesus Christ, his blessing. It's not like Jesus Christ had this conflict and there is not harmony between him and God the Father, God the Holy Spirit when others drown in the flood. No, there's perfect harmony there. And God, who is killing those who are not in the ark and exercising judgment upon them, there's no disharmony there. But hey, let's let him talk, see if he says something that's pretty compelling.
That's a tricky case to make in 60 seconds, but here goes.
Because, his argument is going to be, well, that's the Old Testament, this is the New Testament kind of thing.
Jesus never used violence against people, whether to defend himself or to defend the innocent.
Okay, Jesus never used violence against people. If you're talking about the 33 years that he was upon, the earth during his earthly ministry. But there's the whole entire Old Testament that you are dismissing, so to speak. Again, the flood. Again, Esther and her people being able to defend themselves. What would you call that? What about the angel of the Lord who kills 185,000 people? Well, who commanded that? Do angels of the Lord just go about doing their own thing? No, like God commanded that. Well, that was God the Father. Well, is Jesus Christ at odds with God the Father? And he was saying, no, don't do it. No, they're at perfect harmony. And so I just reject this. If you want to say, don't say the word never, because that's not true. Say never in the New Testament. Maybe you could begin to argue that, or never during his 33 years upon the face of the earth. Okay. But to say never, that becomes very inaccurate. We could look at the 10 Commandments and what happened when someone murdered others or committed adultery, these kind of things. And again, when someone, murders or commits adultery, it's not like God the Father, well, he's the one commanding it and Jesus Christ is at odds with God the Father. No, his blessing is upon his law being carried out.
He teaches his followers to live the same way, not resisting evil and turning the other cheek, Matthew 5, Luke 6. Every time a disciple tries or threatens to use violence in the Gospels, even in defense of the innocent, Christ rebukes them, Luke 9, Luke 22, John 19. The apostles regularly present Jesus' suffering as an example for believers to follow, Romans 12, Philippians 2, 1 Peter 2. Disciples are commended for joyfully accepting the plunder of their property, Hebrews 10. Our struggle is not with worldly enemies or worldly weapons, Ephesians 6. Christians conquer not by killing, but by dying, by the blood of the Lamb, the word of our testimony, and not loving our lives even unto death, Revelation 12. And every church father before Constantine who addressed the subject, Origen, Tertullian, Cyprian, Lactantius, Athenagoras, agreed that killing image bearers of God is always morally wrong. Now, I'm not naive.
Okay, and that's pretty interesting in that he'll talk about it with, I think it's Brett Thune later. I think that's the guy's name. And they'll have an exchange, and he says, I haven't researched it. I don't know early church history when it comes to that, but he said, hey, you're right. You've got a point there up to like 300 AD. Well, then what happened? You have Constantine But beyond that, after Constantine and moving forward from there, in church history, you have quite the opposite. You have an about face where during from Constantine on, you basically have Christians saying, yes, self-defense is a great thing, a grand thing, and a God-honoring thing, using force in self-defense. And be fair to him in that he would argue, can you use self-defense? He would say, yes, you can. It should never be violent. It should be non-violent self-defense, kind of like with Martin Luther King Jr. But again, if Queen Esther and her people, if they were alive today, he would say none of them should be able to defend themselves against, Haman's plot there. If he's out there with the army seeking to destroy Esther and his people. And so you can see that when I look at theology, I like consistency, I like harmony, and it's hard reconciling the two together. Now, he should go on to say, because the obvious thing for Christians, for pacifists to bring up would be, hey, Jesus Christ had 12 disciples. Pastor was talking about this just the other day, and how many of them were martyrs? Almost all of them. I mean, forget Judas Iscariot, but almost all of them were martyrs. John wasn't, but they tried killing him. He wouldn't die. And so the martyrs did not, historically, I believe, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but they did not use violent self-defense. And so he could bring that up as well. Now, that's one argument to make, but to argue that an entire nation cannot defend themselves, that's not the good, that's not the righteous, that's not the Christ-like thing to do. The Christ-like thing to do is to never use force, for a nation to never use force to defend itself and just let itself be raped, pillaged, plundered, everyone murdered, children murdered, that kind of thing. What do you think about that kind of ethic? And I just want to point out, I think it's ironic because there's some parallelism like going on here in that, hey, this guy's arguing it's unchristlike to use self-defense, like forceful self-defense. And TGC, they're letting in false teachers, wolves, the woke stuff into their organization, and they're defending it where we see it in the SBC and stuff like that. Well, hey, you are going to, go and do self-defense, and you're going to expose wolves, and you're going to use mean words and this kind of stuff. Well, what's wrong with you? You do not have the right to self-defense, basically, in that you got to be nice, and you just have to let these false teachers and these wolves devour everyone and take it. That's the parallelism that, am I exaggerating? Yeah, I'm exaggerating, but that is kind of the parallelism that we see going on here.
Subject. Origen, Tertullian, Cyprian, Lactantius, Athenagoras agreed that killing image bearers of God is always morally wrong. Now, I'm not naive. I know my audience will almost entirely disagree with me on this.
Now, and I wonder if he would, if all of them believed that includes the death penalty as well for murder, for adultery, for those kind of things. I wonder if they would agree on that as well. I wonder if they would agree, hey, killing someone who was killed 300 people or murdered 300 people, that's wrong too. I wonder if they'd be lockstep with him there. I wonder if he's oversimplifying things is what I'm getting at.
And that's fine. But be that as it may, there is a strong common good case for tighter gun controls in America, perhaps along Australian lines, which just war advocates could happily support. The stakes are high. During this debate we're having, 10 Americans will be shot and killed during this brief. I apologize.
And if you read Genesis, I forget which chapter it is, 11 or 17, I don't know, maybe 13. You can read of Abraham, who engaged really in the first just war. How can we say that? He was not the aggressor. There is another aggressor going on, and then he responds after the aggression. It's more of in response to. And so you can read of the first just war in the book of Genesis. And I wish that he would go on to show how he can be consistent in the Old Testament and New Testament, or if he's just saying, hey, this is a new thing. God's doing something brand new. We're just going to forget about the Old Testament, everything there. In the Old Testament, God hates killing people, even though he commanded it, and he did it over and over again. And Ahab, King Ahab, he was commanded, hey, you got to take this other person's life. And what happens is either a king or a general. He ended up sparing his life, and a prophet confronts King Ahab and says, hey, because you let this person go who God had ordained appointed for destruction, we're going to do a life for a life. Your life is now in his, in place of his. But again, it would be interesting to see him reconcile his position with the Old Testament. Killing, is that fine in the Old Testament, where we can see God's blessing, his smile is upon it. And then everything just magically changes and God becomes a pacifist once the New Testament occurs. I don't think that's a compelling position at all. And that would strike at the attributes of God, I would think, right?
Shot during this brief debate. They won't all be killed. In Britain, we average 1 gun death per week. And the reason why, I submit to you, is encapsulated by Hilaire Belloc at the end of the 19th century, and albeit writing in a very different context. He said, whatever happens, we have got the Maxim gun and they have not.
Okay, so I gotta respond to that. I mean, one person with a gun can control 100 people without a gun. So if you disarm a society, which would be what he is arguing for, if you disarm a citizenry, which, hey, if you're not entitled to self-defense, which he argues nations aren't and individuals aren't, then it sounds to me like he's arguing you don't even have the right to own a gun. Why would you need it? Unless you're hunting. Or what else would you do with a gun? Hunt or target practice just for fun? I don't know. And beyond that, what are some of the first things that your dictators, your people who did mass killings, what are some of the first things that they did? They instituted gun control. And so he doesn't cite those statistics now, does he? Like in Germany, hey, if you're Jewish, then you do not have the right to own a gun. And part of what made the Holocaust so easy to happen is that they were defenseless. And so if we can sum up God's law and love God, love your neighbor, you want your neighbor to be able to defend themselves. You want a citizenry to be able to defend themselves from a wicked government, wicked rulers, that kind of thing. And again, it's not a bad thing when you have your Hamans rise up and they want to destroy God's people and understand, murder them all, kill them all. It's not a bad thing to pass the law where they can defend themselves. That wasn't a bad thing during Queen Esther's time, and it is not a bad thing here today. God does not change that way in that, hey, 3,000 years ago or however long that was ago, right? Well, that's a great thing for them to be able to defend themselves. And now 3,000 years later, God's changed. And God says, no, don't think they should be able to defend themselves. In other words, God is immutable. And one of the issues that pacifists have to think through is that God does not change. How do you reconcile that with your view of Scripture? So with that, we're going to stop right there. And it's hard because the Montanan within me says, no, we got to watch more of it, respond to the whole thing. Because in Montana, if I remember right, per capita, I think Montanans own the most guns per capita. If we're not number one, we're like number 2 or 3. But I think we're number 1 because we're the most patriotic state there is. But hey, let me know what you think in the comments. Obviously, I believe in self-defense, in biblical self-defense, where you're not the aggressor, you're defending yourself, you're defending other people. Or do you believe in pacifism? That's the way of Christ. That's the way of his disciples. Let me know in the comments below. Do you think this was a good debate that TGC had, where they're bringing on someone who's questioning, hey, should nations even be able to defend themselves against aggressors? Should they just roll over and die? Let me know in the comments. Another thought would be John Piper, way back in the day, years and years ago, he came out basically as a pacifist in that, hey, if someone were attacking him, attacking his family, would John Piper use force against the aggressors? He said no. He said he would not do that. And so let me know your thoughts in the comment. Take a moment. If you believe in self-defense and you are a patriotic American, not as patriotic as Montana, obviously, but if you believe in self-defense, take a moment, share this video with a friend. Tell them Gospel Coalition has lost its mind. And I will see you in the next video.